welcome back to Middle-earth. It's good to have you here again. If you've been listening for a while, you already know this is our quiet corner of Arda, a place where the fires burn low, the world slows down, and the stories feel familiar. Tonight, we'll wander through ancient forests, forgotten kingdoms, and the long shadows of the Second and Third Age. No rush, no noise, just the lore of the Lord of the Rings, told gently, like it was always meant to be heard. So, settle in. Let your mind drift to the Shire, to Rivendell, to the white towers of Minas Tirith. And together, let's return to Middle-earth. In the grey stillness of a Third Age night, under a sky drowned in starlight, the golden wood holds its breath. Silvered leaves whisper without wind, each pale underside catching the faint glow of unseen lamps high in the ancient malorn trees. Somewhere far above, the distant song of elves drifts and fades, a soft lament carried along hidden paths of air. And at the heart of Lothlorien, where the shadows gather more deeply, a small hobbit stands before a basin of unmoving water. Frodo's cloak hangs heavy with the damp of the night. His bare toes curl against the cool grass, feeling every blade, every root, as if the very earth is listening. Before him, the mirror of Galadriel lies still as glass, reflecting not the stars above, but a grey, waiting emptiness. In his hand, on a simple chain, the one ring glints faintly. A dull fire under the starlight. We stand beside him in spirit, close enough to hear his breath, close enough to feel the weight of that small circle of gold. This is not a battlefield. No armies clash here. Yet the fate of Middle-earth hangs more precariously in this quiet clearing than on any field of war. Across from him, Galadriel waits. Not a meme, not a distant icon frozen in legend, but a present, breathing being. Her bare feet rest on the same grass, light yet unyielding, as if the soil itself honors her tread. Starlight catches in her long hair, turning it to a river of pale gold, and in her eyes there is a depth that remembers ages before the sun and moon. She looks at the ring in Frodo's hand, and for a moment, all her long wanderings, all the forgotten roads from Valinor to this hidden wood, seem to converge on that single point of light. When she speaks of what might be, the air changes. The still water in the mirror darkens, then blooms with terrible radiance. We journey into her vision as it rises around us. The golden wood flares with a harsh, unearthly brilliance, every leaf sharp as a blade, every tree a pillar of judgment. Galadriel stands crowned in white fire, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, her voice carrying across mountains and seas. Above Middle-earth, the sky burns with auroras of green and gold. Yet beneath that splendor, shadows lengthen over cities and fields, bending wills, breaking hearts. From our unseen vantage at Frodo's side, we feel it. Awe like worship, terror like drowning. Could this be salvation or only a new, more dazzling tyranny? The world in her vision is ordered, radiant, unyielding. No more Sauron, no more fear. But at what cost? Her hand lifts slowly toward the ring. The chain swings, catching starlight, a bright arc in the thickened air. Between her fingers and that small circle of gold hangs an age of rebellion, regret, and longing we have yet to uncover. The night holds its breath. So do we. Her eyes blaze, her shadow stretches over the grass, and for one heartbeat, Galadriel stands on the very brink. Then, at the edge of choice, on the instant before refusal, everything trembles, and we cut away, leaving the question burning. Why does she step back? Before the golden wood, Galadriel among the rebellious Noldor. So we journey into an earlier light, before the golden wood, before the grey shadows of the Third Age, to a world where Galadriel is not yet a veiled lady of Lorien, but a princess of the most brilliant people in Arda. In Valinor, under the undying radiance of the two trees, She is born into the royal house of Finwë, kin to Fëanor himself, and Tolkien tells us she is strong of body, mind, and will. Not a mere ornament of the court, not simply a fair presence in the Blessed Realm, but a spirit already desiring a realm to rule and order according to her own wisdom. In that ancient West, the Noldor are the craft lords of the elves, restless and curious, hungry for knowledge. Among them, Fëanor blazes brightest, forging the Silmarils, capturing the light of the trees in 3 hallowed jewels. When Melkor's malice ripens, the trees are slain. Valinor falls into shadow, and the Silmarils are stolen into Middle-earth. Fëanor's grief ignites into rebellion. He swears the dreadful oath with his sons, vowing to pursue those jewels at any cost, and he draws many of the Noldor into exile, onto the dark roads of a new age. Where is Galadriel in this storm? Tolkien is clear. Her heart is not fixed on the Silmarils themselves. She does not burn with Fëanor's jewel lust. Her desire is related, but distinct. She looks east and longs for her own land, her own dominion, a place to shape according to her counsel, free from the shadow of the valor and the overbearing brilliance of her kin. When the Noldor depart, she goes with the rebels, not to recover the jewels, but because exile offers her the possibility of rule. Now, Tolkien's manuscripts do not all tell this story in the same way, and here we uncover the story behind the story. In some early drafts, Galadriel is more deeply complicit, standing close to Fëanor's pride, even participating in the rebellion's worst moments. In later writings, especially near the end of Tolkien's life, he softens her guilt. He emphasizes instead her opposition to Fëanor, her rejection of his oath, and yet he preserves that core of ambition. Across the hidden centuries of revision, one thing remains. Her long arc is one of slow, costly repentance. This becomes sharp when the Valar, in time, offer pardon to the Noldor. Many are allowed, even invited, to return over the sea. Galadriel refuses. She will not yet bend the knee or relinquish her claim to a realm in Middle-earth. Is this courage or stubbornness, independence or pride? Tolkien lets all of those motives mingle in her, making her both noble and dangerously self-willed. And so, long before she walks the golden paths of Lothlorien, she has already chosen exile over obedience, her own road over the safe harbours of the West. The young Galadriel leaves the Blessed Realm seeking a kingdom. The Lady of Lorien will one day say, "I will diminish and go into the West and remain Galadriel." Between those two sentences stands the ring. How does the ambitious Princess of Valinor become the penitent queen who can finally say no to absolute power? To see that transformation, we have to follow her into Middle-earth and watch what she builds, and what it costs her. From exile to queen, Galadriel's long road through the ages. So we journey into the First Age, where Galadriel steps out of the blaze of rebellion and into a dimmer, more complicated light. She comes to Beleriand not as a crowned queen, but as a princess in exile, carrying the echo of oaths she did not swear and the weight of pride she did share. And the first court that receives her is not Noldorin at all, but the hidden kingdom of Doriath. In Menegroth, under 1,000 carved stone trees and torchlit halls, she watches two very different rulers. Thingol, tall and magnificent, is proud, jealous of his sovereignty, slow to forgive, quick to take offense. Melian, the Maya, moves more quietly. Her power is veiled, woven into the very girdle that guards the forest, spoken in counsel rather than shouted in command. Not a warlord, not a tyrant, but a presence, ancient and unhurried, whose shadow of wisdom falls across every choice. Is it hard to imagine Galadriel looking at Melian and seeing, for the first time, another way to rule? Yet Doriath will not last. Nothing in that age does. The kinslayings ripple outward, poisoning alliances. Feanor's sons burn their way through friend and foe alike. Great kingdoms rise and are broken in fire and ruin. Galadriel walks through the long defeat. She sees Nargothrond fall, Gondolin betrayed, Doriath itself destroyed, and at last, the war of wrath that shatters Morgoth and drowns almost all Beleriand beneath the sea. When the waters close over those grey lands, most of her proudest kin are dead, exiled or broken. She endures, and when the road back to Valinor is opened after the war of wrath, she does not take it. This is one of those quiet decisions where the story behind the story unfolds. She could have gone home, laid down her weariness, sought pardon face to face. Instead, she remains in Middle-earth, bound to the Hitherlands by desire, by unfinished repentance, and by a still burning wish to shape a realm of her own beauty and her own will. So the centuries turn and we uncover Galadriel of the Second Age, no longer the restless princess, but a wandering power. She weds Celeborn, the Sindarin lord, binding Noldor and Sindar in a single household. Together they move from refuge to refuge, from the grey coasts to Eregion, to the Riverlands, and finally toward the golden wood that will become Lothlorien. Wherever she goes, she gathers the remnant of the Eldar, planting enclaves of light against the growing shadow, trying again and again to preserve a world that is already fading. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is where the hidden centuries matter for the fate of Middle-earth. Through all those wanderings, she still does not sail west. Not when Numenor rises, not when it falls, not when Sauron is overthrown the first time. Every age offers her an exit, and every age finds her still there, choosing to remain entangled in the history she helped begin. By the time we reach the threshold of the Rings of Power, Galadriel is no longer merely ambitious. She is tempered, scarred, and terribly experienced. She has watched realms drown and stars of hope go out, and yet she has not relinquished the idea of a guarded haven under her care. So when Celebrimbor forges the Three, she will accept Nenya, the Ring of Water, and with it a new burden. Not conquest, but preservation by enchantment. What happens when that quieter ring is suddenly bound to the One? That is where her final test will wait. The Three against the One. How Nenya shapes Galadriel's vision. What happens indeed when a quiet ring of preservation is caught in the shadow of the One? To answer that, we journey into the hidden story behind the story, the making of the Three, and the strange, perilous grace that comes with bearing one of them. The 3 elven rings are not like the others. They are Narya, the ring of fire, Nenya, the ring of water, and Vilya, the ring of air. Forged last and in secret by Celebrimbor, they are unsullied by Sauron's direct touch, free of his hand even if not of his design. They are made not for conquest, not for bending wills, but for healing, for preservation, for the slowing of decay in a weary world that has seen too many ages of war. Narya will pass to Círdan, then to Gandalf, to kindle courage against despair. Vilya will rest with Elrond in Rivendell, shoring up that grey refuge against the long years. But Nenya, the ring of water, comes to Galadriel. It is fair and cold, set with a white stone like diamond, a glimmer of starlight caught in crystal. With it, she will weave the enchantments of Lothlorien, the golden malorn trees that do not wither, the timeless air, the sense that in this one small realm, the first age has not quite passed away. Yet there is a paradox at the heart of that beauty. Nenya's power, like that of the other 2, is bound to the fate of the One Ring. As long as the ruling ring endures, its unseen dominion sustains the operations of all the lesser rings, even the 3 that fled Sauron's grasp. So long as he exists, Lorien can remain a near-timeless sanctuary. If the One is destroyed, her enchantments will fail, her woods will fade, and Galadriel herself will diminish and depart. Preservation is paid for with a quiet dependence on the very evil she opposes. And Galadriel feels this in her bones. For centuries she has carried Nenya, walking its grey edge between healing and denial, between stewardship and the temptation to hold time still. What does it do to a mind, to a will, to live in a realm where autumn never quite comes? You begin to love the golden moment more than the living world beyond your borders. You begin to ask again and again, what if I could keep this forever? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is where her test truly begins. As a ring-bearer already, she knows that rings do not create desire, they magnify it. She has watched her own longing for a guarded haven swell under Nenya's influence, has felt how easy it would be to let preservation harden into refusal of change itself. So when Frodo offers her the one ring beneath the Malorn trees, she is not naive, not blind, not unprepared. She knows exactly what such a ring does to the will that wields it, and she has already lived for long centuries with the gentler, quieter cost of trying to keep the world from moving on. The question now is not whether she can take the ring, it is whether she dares to let everything she has preserved finally pass away. A realm suspended in time, Lothlorien as Galadriel's dream made visible. And so we look at what she has been holding back from passing away. Because before Galadriel ever stretches out her hand toward the One Ring, she has already shaped a realm where time itself seems to hesitate. In the grey mists of the Third Age, when the Fellowship first steps beneath the eaves of Lothlorien, the world changes. The air is clear and cool, tasting faintly of rain and leaves. Above them rise the golden boles of the Malorn trees, smooth and pale, their high crowns shimmering with leaves that do not wither in winter, but fall only in a slow, deliberate shower of gold. Sound is hushed. Light is softer, as if the sun has passed through ancient glass. They feel all at once that they have stepped not merely into another forest, but out of the normal flow of days. There is peace here. There is also sorrow. It lies on the land like the grey shadow of a memory, a knowledge that this beauty has already seen long ages and cannot last. You can almost feel the weight of forgotten centuries in the stillness. Lothlorien is not an accident. It is, in a very real sense, Galadriel's dream from the First Age made visible. Long ago, when she walked beside Fëanor and crossed the grinding ice in rebellion, she desired a realm of her own, a place where she could order things according to her wisdom and strength. Here, at last, she has it. Not a vast empire like Gondolin or Nargothrond, but a hidden wood where the decay of the world is held at bay, where beauty is not merely remembered in song, but preserved in living leaves and silver fountains. How is this possible? Because on her finger rests Nenya, the ring of water, one of the three. Its power does not march in armies. It does not break gates or trample kingdoms. It holds. It guards. It wraps Lorien in an enchantment that slows the wearing of time, that keeps the Malin leaves bright and the streams clear, that steels the hearts of its people against despair, even as the world outside grows more grey and dangerous. This is preservation as resistance, but it is also, quietly, a refusal of the natural flow of history. Change is pushed back. Loss is delayed. The story of the world is asked to pause, just here, just a little longer. There is a cost. Lothlorien is fragile, inward turned, a sanctuary hidden behind its own golden curtains. It does not expand. It does not reclaim the lands of the ancient West or challenge Sauron in open war. Galadriel knows that as long as the One Ring endures, her own ring can maintain this shining stasis. But if the One is destroyed, Nenya's power will fade, and this realm will finally begin to die. She has built exactly what she once longed for, and she knows it stands only on borrowed time. So when Frodo lifts the chain and offers her the Master Ring, what is he really offering? a chance to pour this enchantment over all Middle-earth, to make every valley a Lorien under her will, or a chance to let even this beloved dream go and let the age turn at last. As we journey into that moment by the mirror, we uncover just how terrible and how merciful her answer must be. The theology of power, why the One Ring cannot be used for good. So when Frodo lifts that thin grey chain, he is not really offering a weapon. He is offering a theology, a vision of how the world might be ruled. And here we journey into one of Tolkien's deepest convictions, that the way you wield power is not an accessory to goodness. It reveals what you truly worship. Tolkien, the quiet Catholic professor behind this ancient tale, does not imagine goodness as raw strength pointed in a nicer direction. For him to dominate another's will, even for a radiant, shining cause, is already to step into a shadowed sanctuary that does not belong to God. The moment you decide that other minds are clay and you are the potter, you have turned from service to mastery, from gift to grasping. Can such a choice ever lead in the end to light? That is why the One Ring is not a neutral instrument lying on the road, waiting for a virtuous hand. It is a condensed fragment of Sauron's own being, a shard of his desire to control, to coerce, to bend. To put it on is to invite his mode of existence into your own soul, to let his way of seeing the world through fear, calculation, and domination become your way. You might begin with noble intentions. You will not end there. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is the pattern interrupt. The ring does not simply answer to you. You begin by commanding it. You end by echoing it. Think of Boromir. He loves Gondor. He has watched its walls beaten by centuries of war. When he looks at the ring, he does not see treasure. He sees a last, desperate chance. Yet in a matter of days, that sincere love twists into an urge to seize, to take, to justify hurting a friend for the greater good. Where did that voice come from? Or Saruman, once the wise head of the White Council. He studies the enemy to defeat him, peers into the Palantir to gain knowledge, tells himself that, against the power of Mordor, there can be no victory without strength. Step by step, his decision to use the enemy's tools against the enemy turns him into a pale imitation of the Dark Lord he opposes. Not a shield, but a rival tyrant. Using evil against evil does not cancel it. It compounds it. Now set that beside the three rings, Narya, Nenya, Vilya. These are not forged to enslave, but to preserve, to heal, to hold back decay for one more grey season. They too are perilous because even preservation can become possessive. Yet their foundation is not the naked will to dominate. They work, in a hidden way, by strengthening what is already good rather than overruling every will around them. Galadriel knows this difference intimately. For long ages she has wielded Nenya to keep Lothlorien as a kind of holy memory, a fragment of the Elder Days shimmering within the Third Age. But she also knows that Nenya's beauty rides, paradoxically, on the continued existence of the One. If the Master Ring is destroyed, her power will fade, her realm will diminish, her long wanderings and labours will pass into legend. To refuse the ring is to consent to loss. So when she says, "I pass the test," it is not because she lacks imagination or courage or the will to act. It is because she has finally aligned her will with a deeper law written into this world, that some powers cannot be baptized, cannot be safely turned, cannot be used as a shortcut to the kingdom. They must be laid down, or they will claim you. That recognition is not cowardice, it is repentance. And in that repentance, the fate of Middle-earth quietly turns. Because if the mightiest of the Eldar will not seize, what does that say about what must happen next when a small hobbit walks alone into the very heart of shadow? I do not deny that my heart has great desire. Galadriel's inner conflict. And in that repentance, the fate of Middle-earth quietly turns. But inside Galadriel, in that grey moonlit glade above the mirror, there is a storm. Because when she says, "I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired to ask what you offer," she is not speaking as a detached saint. She is confessing the ache of thousands of years. From the first age, she has wanted power, beauty, and a realm of her own. Not a throne of bones, not a land drowned in shadow, but a kingdom of light that could not be touched by decay. She left Valinor in the days of Fëanor, driven not only by anger at Morgoth, but by a desire to rule a land that would answer to her will. That longing never entirely left her. It only went underground. By the time we meet her in Lothlorien, that desire has been refined, almost sanctified. She is the Lady of the Golden Wood, bearer of Nenya, the Ring of Water. For centuries, that hidden ring has let her hold back the weariness of the world, to keep one last pocket of ancient beauty unfaded, unfallen, untouched by the long defeat. We journey into Lorien and feel it at once. Time does not move the same way there. That is Nenya at work, and it is Galadriel's will. But preservation is a dangerous love. The more you fear loss, the more you are tempted to clutch, to control, to freeze what you cherish so that it can never change. Galadriel loves Middle-earth's rivers and trees and starlight with a fierce, almost maternal devotion. Yet she knows that her urge to protect them can slide, almost imperceptibly, into an urge to dominate them. To say, "This shall not pass." Not as a prayer, but as a command. And for age after age, bearing Nenya has sharpened that edge. She has seen how even good power, a power to heal and preserve, can become a way of refusing the natural, painful passing of the years. If the three stand only by the one, then her own beauty, her own realm, are secretly chained to Sauron's ring. Imagine knowing that paradox every time you look at your own hand. Tolkien calls her greatest of the Eldar, except Fëanor. She understands exactly what that means. Fëanor burned the world for his jewels. If she falls, she will fall greater and more terrible. So when Frodo offers her the ring, she does not merely fantasize. She sees a true possibility. Beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, a queen over all lands, adored and obeyed, ending war by ending freedom. All right, dim the lights. Get comfortable under your blanket. Because in the mirror scene, all those hidden centuries of desire surge to the surface at once. Her ancient ambition, her love for her people, her dread of becoming what she hates. What does she choose when the world and her own heart pull her in opposite directions? That is where we go next, as we uncover the story behind the story of Galadriel's final, costly refusal. The mirror of Galadriel, seeing the world, seeing herself. So we follow her in our minds down the grey paths of Lothlorien until the trees open and the air grows very still. In a shaded hollow stands a simple basin, a silver bowl upon a pedestal of living stone. No trumpets, no ancient inscriptions, just water, clear and cold, waiting in the shadow. This is the mirror of Galadriel, and tonight we journey into what it truly shows. She pours the water in silence. Frodo and Sam stand beside her, small and uncertain, while above them the malin leaves whisper of forgotten ages. She will not command them. She will not promise answers. Instead, she gives them a choice. They may look, if they will. Not a crystal ball, not a fixed prophecy, but a perilous invitation. What would you do if the fate of Middle-earth might shimmer back at you from a darkened pool? Sam looks first. In the still surface he sees the Shire, his home, peaceful for a heartbeat, and then a flame. Trees he knows by name cut down, smoke staining the sky, wheels and engines gnawing the green. It is not a tidy vision. It is fear-given image, love threatened with ruin. When he jerks back, heart racing, the water lies calm again, as if the world had never burned. Then Frodo looks. The mirror deepens, becomes a window on the hidden roads of the age. He sees distant lands, ships, towers, the grey sea, and at last, the eye, searching, lidless, wreathed in fire, groping across the world for him. Is this a certain future or only one path among many? Galadriel will not say. She hints, she guides, but she refuses to seize the vision and pin it down. That restraint is not an accident, it is part of her own test. Because the mirror is not merely a magical gadget of the Third Age. It is a spiritual instrument. It reflects not only the world, but the heart that bends over it. It shows possibilities twisted by desire, futures coloured by dread. To let mortals gaze into that depth is to stand once more at the brink of command. She could interpret, she could direct, she could use their terror to steer the story. In refusing to do so, she resists the old Noldorin hunger to rule. Yet the visions have done their work. The Shire in flames, the eye searching relentlessly. Suddenly the ring on Frodo's breast is no longer an abstract burden. It is an immediate, burning problem. How can he, a single hobbit, withstand such an enemy? In that panic, another possibility arises. Give it to someone greater, someone ancient, someone who already bears a ring and a realm. The surface of the mirror shivers in the night air as Frodo turns to her. His voice is small, but the offer is enormous. He holds out the one ring. Sam gasps. Time seems to pause over the water. In that instant, Galadriel is no longer merely the guide by the basin. She is the one being judged. What will she see now if she dares to look, not into the mirror, but into the dark reflection of her own desire? That is the moment we uncover next, as the Lady of Lorien stands on the knife edge between Queen and penitent exile. You will give me the ring freely. The shape of the temptation. So when she finally speaks, it is not in a whisper, it is a revelation. Galadriel rises, and the ring answers her unspoken thought with words that seem to shake the golden wood itself. In place of the Dark Lord, you would set up a queen. Not a servant, not a steward, a queen. Already the temptation has a shape, not annihilation, but replacement, a new centre of the world with her at its heart. And I shall not be dark, she continues, and we journey into the careful poetry of this vision, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. Morning and night, beginning and ending, hope and fear, light and shadow fused into one ancient figure. The parallel images climb in intensity, like the mounting beat of war drums wrapped in song. This is not Sauron's crude tyranny. It is an almost liturgical promise of transcendence. Fair as the sea and the sun and the snow upon the mountain. The cadence rolls like waves. Sea, sun, snow. Three pure, untouchable images, each drawn from her long wanderings across ages and roads, most of us only glimpse in the appendices. The ring is speaking in a language tailored to her nature, offering her what she has always loved, beauty, order, clarity, magnified beyond measure. Who could resist being the one radiant constant in a grey and fading age? Dreadful as the storm and the lightning. Here the tone shifts, not only adored but feared, not only fair but terrible. The promise is total. She would be the axis around which all free peoples must turn, the one will strong enough to sweep away Sauron, to drive back every shadow, to impose an unbreakable peace. Is that not, on the surface, what the fate of Middle-earth demands? Stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair. In that last paradox, we uncover the core of the offer. Love and despair bound together. A perfected, ordered world, but under an absolute monarch of mind and spirit. She imagines herself not as a torturer in a dark tower, but as the final, flawless ruler who can no longer be gainsaid. This is domination dressed as salvation, the story behind the story of every benevolent tyrant Tolkien ever distrusted. And then, the most insidious line of all, "You will give me the ring freely." She names what makes this so dangerous. There would be no theft, no assault, no open rebellion like Feanor's, only acceptance, consent. Frodo's free gift would make her reign feel almost lawful, almost rightful. How easy it would be to step across that threshold and tell herself she was only receiving what was offered. In this moment, the narrative truly pauses on a knife's edge. Tolkien does not wink at us and guarantee her virtue. He lets the possibility of a dark queen hang there, heavy as thunder over Lothlorien. The hidden centuries of her pride and longing all converge here. What she does next will not only decide Frodo's road, but the very shape of her own repentance. And that is where we must go next. Gandalf, Boromir, and Galadriel, 3 ways to face the same fire. And that knife's edge is not hers alone. We have seen others brought to this same fire before, and not all have stepped back from the heat. In a quiet hobbit hole in Bag End, long before the golden shadows of Lothlorien, another ring offer hangs in the air. Frodo, frightened and desperate, holds out the one to Gandalf. The room is small, the world outside still half forgotten in its peace. Yet in that moment, the fate of Middle-earth trembles, because if Gandalf accepts, everything changes. He will not even touch it. He recoils, and his refusal is not casual. It is terrified. He knows that with the ring, his compassion, his wisdom, his ancient authority would be twisted into a power too great and terrible to oppose. Gandalf does not doubt that he would mean well. That is the horror. With the ring he would do good according to his own wisdom, heal wrongs, shatter tyrannies, rally the weak. And in doing so, he would become a tyrant more absolute than Sauron, because his rule would be justified in his own mind by all the evils he prevented. This is Tolkien's theology of power laid bare. Domination, even for noble ends, is still domination. Now we journey into a very different room. The broken grey light on Armen Hen, the wind hissing through ancient stones, Boromir's breath coming hard. He too loves his people. He too fears their destruction. Gondor is failing, the White City standing alone against the shadow, and here in front of him is the one weapon that could break the enemy. His motives are not small or selfish, yet as he speaks, as he presses Frodo, the language shifts. What begins as a plea becomes an argument, then an accusation, then an attempt to seize. Boromir falls not because he wants evil, but because he believes the ends justify the means. He cannot imagine that refusing power might be the true road to victory. And for a heartbeat, don't we feel the pull with him? Surely one bold stroke would be easier than this long, uncertain road. Let's step together into Galadriel's position, balanced between these two. Like Gandalf, she bears immense spiritual and political weight. She is already a ring-bearer, ruling a realm preserved by Nenya against the decay of the age. Like Boromir, she loves her people fiercely and sees the grey shadow lengthening over their world. The One Ring offers all 3 the same shortcut. Take it, wield it, impose order, save what you love. What separates Gandalf and Galadriel from Boromir is not that they desire less. It is that they fear more. They possess a deeper horror at what they themselves could become if given absolute power, a clear vision that the Dark Lord they dread might be the future shape of their own will. That is the story behind the story of their refusals. And in this triad, wizard, man, and elf lady, we uncover a pattern running through the hidden centuries of Tolkien's legendarium. The truly wise fear their own capacity for domination more than they fear the enemy's strength. Galadriel's choice in Lothlorien is not an isolated triumph of virtue. It is one bright link in a long, perilous chain of renunciations that holds back the fate of Middle-earth. But her refusal carries a cost and a gift, unlike theirs. To see that, we need to watch what happens the instant she lets the ring pass by. The moment of refusal. I will diminish and go into the west. So we stay there in that grey glade beneath the ancient Malorn trees, and we do not look away. Frodo's offer hangs in the air like a drawn breath. Galadriel has shown us the terrible vision, has stood revealed as a possible Dark Queen, beautiful and dreadful as the storm and the starless night. And then, at the very height of the shadow, something unexpected happens. She laughs. Not a mad laugh, not the cruel delight of someone seizing power, but a clear, ringing sound, like water over stone, like a bell heard far away across forgotten seas. That sound breaks the spell of the ring's glamour. It is the sound of someone waking from a dream of greatness and remembering who they truly are. In that instant, we journey into the still point of her whole, long story. Then she speaks the words that Tolkien builds 3 ages of history toward. I pass the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. It is a coronation in reverse, a queen laying down a crown she has not yet taken. What does it mean to diminish? For an elf of her stature, it is not just becoming smaller, it is consenting to fade, to let the light of Lothlorien wane, to accept the slow loosening of her power when the One Ring is destroyed and Nenya's hidden strength fails. She chooses loss over domination. She chooses obscurity over a new, terrible greatness. In Middle-earth, that is a kind of death. Elven realms do not simply end, they thin, they pass, they become memory. Galadriel is choosing to let her realm become a story others tell, rather than a throne from which she rules the fate of Middle-earth. How many of us, given the chance to fix the world by force, would make that trade? I will go into the west. On the surface, it sounds geographical, a retirement plan across the sea. But remember her ancient wanderings. Long ago, she left the Blessed Realm in pride, hungering for a kingdom of her own in the Hitherlands. To go back now is to reverse that road. It is not escape. It is surrender to the judgment and mercy of the valor she once defied. In Tolkien's legendarium, the West is not just a place, but a presence. And then the quiet heart of it. And remain Galadriel. She refuses the magnified, monstrous self the ring offers. She will not become a radiant tyrant, remaking the world according to her will. She would rather be herself, limited, penitent, bound by love instead of power. Identity in Tolkien's world is preserved not by expansion, but by humility. This is why, in his later writings, Tolkien ties this moment directly to her eventual pardon and permission to sail. Her refusal is not a random burst of virtue, it is the climax of a centuries-long arc of repentance. Yet even here the choice is not clean and costless. When she passes the test, another kind of test begins, and its price will touch every leaf of Lorien. Because what happens to an immortal realm when its guardian has chosen to fade? Tolkien rewrites his own legend, Galadriel's evolving backstory. What happens is not only inside the story, it is also inside the mind of the storyteller. When we talk about Galadriel's refusal, we are not just watching an elf queen in a grey wood. We are watching Tolkien himself, over decades, revising, repenting, and reshaping who she is. And as we journey into those drafts and late notes, we uncover the story behind the story that turns one quiet scene by a basin of water into the hinge of an entire age. In the earliest conceptions, Galadriel is not yet the almost sacred lady of Lorien. She is another Noldorin princess in a crowded legendarium, proud, ambitious, and more openly implicated in the rebellion of the Noldor. In some notes, she burns to leave Valinor not merely from love of Middle-earth, but from a desire for a realm of her own, defiant toward the Valar, unwilling to submit. Not a guardian in exile, but a rebel who walks the forbidden roads east with her kin. Across the hidden centuries of Tolkien's own writing life, that begins to change. As he revises the Silmarillion material, especially in the late 1950s and 60s, he slowly lifts Galadriel out of the crowd and sets her apart. He calls her greatest of the Eldar, except Fëanor. But where Fëanor blazes and shatters, she becomes something steadier and more enduring, a power tempered by long grief. Her story bends toward penitence. She will not go back to Valinor while the ban lies on her. She will endure exile and shadow, and her desire for lordship is slowly recast as a burden she must unlearn. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is where Tolkien's process and that moment in Lorien finally lock together. In late notes, he explicitly ties her refusal of the One Ring to her final forgiveness. The ban is lifted, we are told, in part because she has at last abandoned her ancient desire for dominion. The Valar do not simply pardon an innocent exile, they receive a penitent queen who has refused the last and greatest temptation. That means the mirror scene is doing double duty. Inside the fictional timeline, it is the test of a ring-bearer who already holds Nenya, who has preserved an immortal realm under the very shadow of Sauron's ring. But behind the page, it becomes the culmination of a story Tolkien is still retrofitting. A line that runs back from Frodo's outstretched hand, through the Golden Wood, across the seas, into the light of the two trees and the first rebellion. Let's step together into that realization. When Galadriel spreads her arms and imagines herself a beautiful and terrible queen, and then lets the vision pass, Tolkien is also closing a circle he has been drawing for years. Understanding his evolving conception lets us see her refusal not as an isolated beat, but as his chosen way of resolving a centuries-long moral tension, both hers and, in a quiet way, his own as sub-creator. And of course, when an author heals a character's history retroactively, the fate of Middle-earth itself begins to look different. Because if this is the end of her old desire, what exactly must now end in Lorien with it? The cost of saying no. What Galadriel chooses to lose. What ends in Lorien is not just an era. It is an enchantment, an illusion, and a shelter that cannot last. When Galadriel lets Frodo's offer fall away, she is not only refusing the One, she is quietly signing the death warrant of her own ring. Nenya, the Ring of Water, has held back time itself, wrapping the Golden Wood in a grey, gentle pause while the centuries rushed by outside. And she knows, because she is wise and because the mirror has shown her, that if the ruling ring is destroyed, the power of the three will fade. Not weaken. Fade. The spell will lift. What does that actually mean beyond the poetry? It means that the soft, unchanging light of Lothlorien will begin to move with the sun again. Leaves will fall and not return in the same way. The hidden borders that turned away shadow will thin. The Malorn trees, which have outlasted kingdoms of men, will at last obey the same decay that rules the rest of the world. And for the first time in an age, the Golden Wood will be vulnerable, not to armies alone, but to time, to forgetting, to the slow wearing down of all beautiful things. For her people, this is a sentence of exile and departure. Many of the Galadrim will look westward and feel the sea-longing rise, no longer muffled by Nenya's quiet song. Ships that waited in thought will become real ships, leaving grey wakes across the water. The last stronghold of Elder Days beauty east of the sea will not be conquered by an enemy. It will simply pass into memory. We journey into deep dives into Middle-earth lore and talk about battles and heroes, but here the loss is quieter and crueler. An age of light goes out not with a scream, but with a sigh. And then there is Galadriel herself. Remember what the ring offered her in that terrible vision. Not a trinket, but the chance to be beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, a queen whom all would love and despair. For one who once defied the Valar, who crossed the grinding ice because she desired a realm of her own, this is the final temptation. With the One, she could shape the fate of Middle-earth, not as counselor but as architect, not an advisor in the shadows but the hand on the lever of history. By saying no, she accepts a smaller, fading role. She chooses to be a voice, not a throne. She agrees to become transient in the very world she helped sustain, to advise the ring-bearer and then watch as the centers of power shift to men, to Aragorn's line, to a future in which her name will be a legend on the edge of other people's stories. Is that not a kind of death for one who has walked through 3 ages? Here the emotional cost cuts deepest. After ages of struggle, of rebellion and long patience, she must stand still while her life's work wanes. She has poured herself into this refuge, into the white towers, the silver fountains, the golden leaves that do not fall. Now she must trust that a world where things truly change, even break, is better than a world held in perfect, false preservation by her will. This is the story behind the story of her smile when she passes the test. It is not the smile of someone spared a burden, but of someone who has chosen to lose. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable for a second, because this is easy to miss. Refusal here is not passive. It is an active embrace of loss, a deliberate opening of the hand. She lets go of power, of place, of being central, so that a freer, more fragile good can live without her. And that decision will send ripples far beyond the golden wood, into the new age that waits just beyond the fall of the ring. What if she had said yes? The Dark Queen timeline. And yet, as we sit with that open hand, we have to ask the question the story itself dares to whisper. What if she had closed it? What if, in that grey glade of Lothlorien, Galadriel had taken the ring, not as a test refused, but as a gift accepted? Dim the lights. Get comfortable for a second, because we're going to step across a hidden threshold. In one breath, the golden wood remains what we know, a sanctuary preserved by Nenya, held apart from the slow decay of the Third Age. In another, we journey into a darker branch of the tale, where the ring slides onto Galadriel's finger and the world shudders. She has desired a realm of her own since the First Age, when she left Valinor with Feanor and the rebel Noldor. Now that ancient desire finds its perfect instrument. How would she meet Sauron, ring to ring? Not as he does, with armies, engines and open terror. Her whole history pushes the other way. She has watched kingdoms rise and fall for 3 ages. She knows that raw force breaks, but does not heal. So in this Dark Queen timeline, we uncover a slower, more terrible war. First, she would hide, masking the ring with all her lore, strengthening the White Council, drawing Elrond, Gandalf, even the remnants of Númenorian blood into an alliance that believes it is resisting the shadow. Then, when Sauron moves, she would strike at his mind. Imagine the mirror of Galadriel turned outward, its visions no longer a private warning, but a weapon. Through the One, she could assail Barad-dûr, not only with power, but with knowledge, his own arts of domination refined and reflected back. Perhaps she would break him, even unmake his body and cast down the Dark Tower. For a time, the banners of the West might fly over a unified Middle-earth. The long war ended. Peace, order, safety. But under whose will? This is where Tolkien's theology of power bites deepest. The One Ring does not serve. It rules. Even if Sauron falls, Galadriel's rule would harden, radiant and absolute. Lothlorien's beauty, once a fragile echo of the Blessed Realm, would become a template imposed on the world. Its golden light would spread like a net, the very enchantments that once sheltered wanderers now binding them. Forests would be ordered according to her design, not their own wildness. The diverse tongues and customs of men and dwarves would be gently, irresistibly harmonized until the grey, forgotten edges of the map all sing one song, hers. Is this better than Sauron? In some ways, yes. There would be less open cruelty, fewer pits and racks and burning towers. Yet, it would be more invasive. Sauron batters bodies. Galadriel with the ring could reshape hearts and minds for their own good, until even resistance feels like ingratitude. This is the story behind the story of her temptation. Not cartoonish evil, but a nearly convincing good that leaves no room for genuine freedom. And once that age begins, who could end it? Who would cast down a queen beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, if the fate of Middle-earth seems secure beneath her hand? Hold that image, because in the next part we'll trace exactly what is lost and gained when she chooses the harder road and lets that future die. Power, pity, and providence. How Galadriel's choice fits Tolkien's moral pattern. That future dies in a single, quiet refusal. And in that refusal, Tolkien is doing something he has done again and again in this ancient grey world. He lets mercy and renunciation, not conquest, decide the fate of Middle-earth. If we journey into the wider pattern, Galadriel's choice suddenly sits beside three other moments you already know by heart. Bilbo, deep under the misty mountains, has Gollum at his mercy. He could kill him. He is afraid, disgusted, alone in the dark. But he sees not a monster only, but a withered, miserable creature. And he spares him. Years later, Frodo stands at the crack of doom and cannot, in the end, destroy the ring. He fails. And yet, that failure, colliding with Bilbo's earlier pity, becomes the opening for Providence, as Gollum's mad joy and fall finally unmake the ring. And in between, on those long roads through shadow, Sam has carried the ring and tasted its power, and still gives it back. Who does that? These are not victories of iron will. They are choices to let go, to refuse to seize total control of the story. Tolkien called the history of Arda a long defeat. Age after age in which even the brightest triumphs are partial and temporary, and the shadow always returns in some new form. The faithful response? In that kind of world is not to build a final empire of safety, but to act rightly within limits you cannot finally overcome. Galadriel knows this long defeat in her bones. She crossed the grinding ice, defied the Valar, sought realms of her own in forgotten centuries when the world was younger and more perilous. Now she bears Nenya, preserving Lothlorien against time, yet bound to the One Ring's continued existence. When Frodo offers her the Master Ring, he is, in a sense, offering her a way to arrest the long defeat by force. She could hold back decay, command hearts, freeze history at its most beautiful moment. Not a mere queen of an enchanted wood, but the ruler of an age without end. And she says no. She accepts diminishment. She chooses a victory that will also mean the fading of her own people, the loss of her hidden realm, and ultimately her own departure across the sea. All right, dim the lights. Get comfortable under your blanket. This is not a sentimental gesture. It is a hard theological line in Tolkien's imagination. You do not save the world by becoming its master. Here we uncover the story behind the story. Providence in Tolkien is not a puppet master forcing outcomes, but a mysterious alignment where free choices, even failures, can be woven into unexpected good, so long as characters refuse to play God with the narrative. Bilbo's pity, Frodo's collapse, Sam's surrender of the ring, Galadriel's renunciation of a radiant tyranny. Together, they mark the places where power steps back, and something larger is allowed to work. In that sense, Galadriel's refusal is one of the clearest moments in all his legendarium, where a being of immense power consciously trusts that larger pattern, instead of imposing her own vision on the world. Not a dark queen, but a penitent steward of a passing age, and in the next part, we'll trace how that trust reshapes her destiny, opening the grey roads west and closing the last door on any elven empire in Middle-earth. A quiet echo of Feanor. How Galadriel avoids her kinsman's fate. And that door closing on any elven empire brings us to a quieter, older echo, one that rings all the way back into the First Age. Because Galadriel's refusal in Lothlorien is not just a wise choice in the moment, it is a direct answer to another Noldorin voice, blazing and terrible, that once refused to surrender. To understand the weight of her decision, we journey into the story behind the story. Feanor, greatest of the Noldor in craft, maker of the Silmarils. In the ancient light of Valinor, he captures the radiance of the two trees in 3 jewels, pouring into them all his genius, his pride, and his fierce, possessive love. When Melkor and Ungoliant destroy the trees, the Valar ask for the Silmarils, that their light might heal the world. Feanor refuses. Not a moment of hesitation, not a tearful surrender, but a hard, burning no that will shape the fate of Middle-earth. From that refusal comes the Oath of Feanor, wild and absolute, binding him and his sons to pursue the Silmarils at any cost. The roads from that night lead directly into kinslaying at Alqualondi, the theft of the Teleri ships, the exile from Valinor, and centuries of grey sorrow and blood. One elf clings to his treasure, and the world darkens. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and hold that image next to Galadriel in her golden wood. She too is Noldor. She too once left Valinor with desire in her heart, longing for a realm of her own to rule and to beautify. In Lothlorien, with Nenya on her hand, she has finally achieved it. A hidden land, preserved against time, a fragment of the blessed realm held back from decay. Is that so different from Feanor's captured light? When Frodo offers her the One Ring, her temptation is not only to overthrow Sauron, but to extend Lorien's preservation over all lands, to make the whole world a reflection of her will and her taste. Feanor clung to 3 jewels. Galadriel is offered the power to turn Middle-earth itself into a kind of living Silmaril. Who among us, seeing all we love fading, would not feel that pull? Here is the pattern interrupt in the long tragedy of the Noldor. Both Feanor and Galadriel are driven by love of beauty and a desire to preserve it from shadow. But he chooses possessiveness and, when thwarted, violence. She chooses release. He cries an oath that no one may restrain him. She laughs, terrible and then gentle, and says, "I pass the test." Tolkien himself calls her greatest of the Eldar except Feanor, inviting us to see her as his spiritual heir, standing at a crossroads he once faced. Will she repeat his pattern or redeem it? In that moment by the mirror, we uncover her answer. Where once an elf refused to surrender his treasure and plunge the world into darkness, now an elf surrenders the chance to possess ultimate power and allows a new age to dawn. And in the next section, we'll follow how that surrender unravels her own enchantments, opening the hidden centuries of her past to judgment and, at last, to mercy. Ring-bearers. In conversation, Galadriel, Frodo, and the burden they share. So when we return to that glade above the silver basin, we're not just watching a temptation, we're watching a meeting of ring-bearers. On one hand, a small hobbit, already bowed under the one. On the other, an ancient elf lady, veiled in white and grey, who quietly carries Nenya, the ring of water. 2 circles of power, 2 different burdens, one shared fate. Galadriel's ring is not the one, yet its whole purpose is entangled with it. Nenya preserves, conceals, holds Lothlorien against the long defeat of the age. As long as the One endures, her hidden realm shines like a fragment of an earlier world. If the One is destroyed, her own power will fade. So when Frodo offers her the Master Ring, we journey into a moment where gain and loss, desire and duty, are tightly knotted together. Could any heart remain simple in that light? Watch how she speaks to him. She does not pretend she is above temptation. She names it. She shows it. For a heartbeat, she unveils the dark queen she might become. beautiful and terrible, strong enough to bend the wills of all peoples. This is not theatrical villainy. It is self-knowledge. And then, before Frodo's frightened eyes, she lets that vision pass. "I passed the test," she says, and in that quiet sentence we uncover the story behind the story. She is teaching him what resistance looks like from the inside. Because Frodo needs more than warnings about the ring. He needs a pattern. Someone older, wiser, who looks straight at the same promise of power and says, deliberately, no. Her transparency becomes a kind of armor for him. If she, greatest of the Eldar remaining in Middle-earth, can confess desire and still refuse, then perhaps a hobbit of the Shire can endure a little longer on the dark roads ahead. Have you ever noticed how much more lonely his task would feel if she had simply smiled and pretended the ring meant nothing to her? That inner choice quietly shapes everything that follows. When the time comes for farewells in Lothlorien, she does not keep. She gives. Not armies, not commands, gifts. The phial of light drawn from the ancient star of Erendil to answer the shadow where even memory fails. The grey cloaks that hide small travellers from unfriendly eyes. The lembas that will sustain a hobbit and his gardener beyond all ordinary strength. Each present is a little reversal of the ring's logic. Instead of centralizing power in herself, she pours strength outward into others. And remember, Frodo's offer is itself an act of trust. He looks at her, at this radiant, terrible, compassionate figure, and believes she might be a better guardian than he is. He is willing to surrender, to lay down the heaviest burden in the world at her feet. Her refusal is not only a victory over her own past, it is an honoring of his faith. She will not betray the hope of the small. So Frodo leaves Lothlorien still bearing the one, but no longer feeling that he walks alone against an inevitable doom. He has seen that even the mighty can reject domination. The fate of Middle-earth has been strengthened in a quiet garden far from battlefields. Yet there is a cost to that choice, a price written into the very foundations of Galadriel's power. And in the next section, we'll follow how every lembas wafer and every glimmer of that phial carries her toward a long-deferred judgment she cannot escape. Why not use the ring, then give it up? The myth of temporary tyranny. Yet that garden choice raises a thorny question many of us can't quite shake. If Galadriel is so wise, so powerful, if Gandalf is a Maya with ancient fire in his veins, why not take the ring, use it swiftly to crush Sauron, and then, once the shadow is gone, lay it aside? It sounds reasonable. It sounds almost responsible, a temporary tyranny in service of peace. But to understand why Tolkien shuts that road forever, we have to remember how the ring actually works. It is not a sword you pick up and put down. It is a binding. The One Ring does not merely obey a will, it clings to it. It seeks out every hidden desire, every buried ambition, and magnifies them until they fill the horizon. The more you call upon its power, the more your mind and the ring's purpose intertwine, until the thought of surrender feels not noble, but unbearable. You don't just wield it, you are rewritten by it. We see the story behind the story of this process most clearly in Saruman. He does not begin as a Dark Lord. He begins as Curanir the White, Master of Law, head of the Council, the one who will study Sauron's devices so that others need not. He peers into the arts of ring-making, he watches the roads of the enemy. He uses the Palantir at first to gather knowledge. Just knowledge, just an advantage. And yet, over years and centuries, a subtle shift. He stops saying, "We must oppose Sauron," and begins to say, "We must master him." He stops imagining a world freed and starts imagining a world arranged. His world. Not a mere servant of the shadow, not simply a spy gone astray, but a rival power, building engines and armies in Isengard, dreaming of a new order with himself at the center. Could he step back? Could he, at any point, say, "This has gone far enough"? By the time we meet him in The Lord of the Rings, that door is closed. The path of domination has not just dirtied his hands, it has reshaped his heart. This is Tolkien's great refusal of the myth of temporary tyranny. Once you accept domination as a tool, even for a good cause, you have already surrendered something essential. Your ends bend to match your means. You do not merely use coercion, you become the kind of person for whom coercion feels natural, even necessary. So when Frodo offers Galadriel the ring, she is not only refusing a golden band, she is refusing that fantasy of controlled, time-limited power. She has watched Saruman fall. She has seen in her own long wanderings from the First Age how desire for a realm of one's own can lead from rebellion to ruin. And in that moment, by the mirror, when she grows tall and terrible in Frodo's sight, she is tasting the truth. If she took it, she would never willingly let it go. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Because in the next part, we journey into what that refusal actually costs her, and how the fate of Middle-earth is written in the quiet loss of every grey leaf of Lothlorien. Galadriel and Gandalf, shared wisdom, shared fear. Because in that cost we begin to see she is not alone. Her refusal in the Golden Wood is answering another refusal, far away in a quiet hobbit hole, when a grey wizard flinches back from the same terrible offer. In Bag End, the fire is low, the world outside is small and safe, and yet the fate of Middle-earth is already pressing in. Bilbo has left. The ring lies on the hearth, and Frodo, bewildered, reaches for the only guide he trusts. "Take it," he says, and Gandalf the Grey steps back as if from a flame. "Do not tempt me. I dare not take it, not even to keep it safe, unused." Why such fear from one we have watched face dragons, wraiths, and the long shadow of Dol Guldur? His answer is the story behind the story. Gandalf knows that with the ring, he would not become a second Sauron in the same shape, but something more subtle and perhaps more terrible. A ruler who begins by doing good, by ordering the world, by compelling peace. Not a mere wanderer, not simply a counselor, but a commander of wills, and he is afraid of that. Deeply afraid. Centuries later, beneath the ancient Malin trees of Lothlorien, Frodo speaks almost the same words to Galadriel. "You are wise and fearless and fair. You are the lady of the Galadrim. I will give you the One Ring if you ask for it." Again, a ring-bearer steps back from the fire. Again, we hear the same reasoning, now clothed in elven splendor. She would begin as a savior and end as a tyrant, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here we uncover a hidden symmetry. Gandalf already bears Narya, the Ring of Fire, given in secret at the Grey Havens to strengthen hearts against despair. Galadriel bears Nenya, the Ring of Water, preserving her grey sanctuary against the decay of the age. Both are already wielders of great, subtle power. They have spent centuries guiding rather than forcing, choosing the long roads of counsel, friendship, and quiet influence over the straight, brutal line of command. Is it any wonder that both of them fear what they would become if handed absolute leverage over the wills of others? Their terror is not of Sauron alone. It is self-knowledge. They see how the ring would take their deepest virtues, their patience, their vision, their longing to heal, and turn them into engines of domination. So they remain what they were sent or shaped to be, kindlers of hope, not rulers. Gandalf walks as the grey pilgrim, stirring hearts in forgotten villages, nudging kings and hobbits alike. Galadriel keeps a hidden haven where weary travellers are rested, armed, and then released, never bound. They do not seize the world, they equip others to face it. And in their twin refusals we glimpse a quiet backbone of the tale. The mightiest allies of the West deliberately leave a power vacuum where a dark queen or a white lord could stand. Into that empty space steps a hobbit with a frail courage and shaking hands, Could anything be more against the logic of the ring than that? In the next part, we journey into what that choice means for Galadriel herself. The slow fading of Lorien, the breaking of Nenya's enchantment, and the long-delayed road back over the sea. Is Galadriel a saint or just late to repent? Heroism and accountability. So when Galadriel lets the ring pass by, when she accepts the fading of Lorien and the breaking of Nenya's grey enchantment, what are we actually watching? A stainless saint at work, or someone finally laying down a burden she chose long ago? Many readers meeting her first in The Lord of the Rings feel the saint. By the time we reach that golden wood, she seems almost flawless, wise, gentle, terrible in majesty, yet full of pity. A kind of ancient spiritual center of the Third Age. She reads hearts, comforts Frodo, restrains Gimli's shame, and her realm feels untouched by the world's corruption. It is easy to see her as a static paragon, a holy figure who could never truly fall. But if we journey into the older tales, the hidden centuries behind that moment, another Galadriel walks the roads of history. This is the Noldorin princess, who left Valinor in the shadow of Feanor's rebellion, who desired not only to see Middle-earth, but to rule a realm of her own. Tolkien, in his late notes, even uses the language of revolt about her stance toward the Valar. She is not innocent of the great pride of her people. For long ages she refuses the summons to return west, clinging to her power, to her land, to the beauty she has helped preserve. So when Frodo lifts the One Ring toward her, we uncover more than a single, clean act of heroism. We see a collision of ages of desire with a single instant of grace. Her vision of herself as a dark queen, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, is not a random fantasy. It is the story behind the story of her whole life, compressed into one blazing image. The realm she once wanted, now magnified to apocalyptic scale. Is it any wonder her voice shakes? Her refusal, then, is both heroic and penitential. She does a great good, freely, with clear understanding of the cost. Yet at the same time, she finally surrenders the last echo of that ancient revolt. In accepting that Lorien must diminish, that Nenya's hidden power must fail, she accepts also the pardon of the Valar she has resisted. Tolkien himself frames this as a real change of heart, not a foregone conclusion, not a ritual gesture from someone who could never have done otherwise. And that complexity is what makes her so compelling. She is not an untouchable icon, frozen in virtue. She is a penitent queen whose greatness includes the courage to admit she was wrong, to turn back after centuries of wandering in the world's long shadow. That is a different kind of might, and a rarer one. So, if we see the mirror scene as both heroism and repentance, the fate of Middle-earth hanging on a single, quiet surrender, the moment only grows in power, because what comes after that surrender, the slow unraveling of her realm, the grey roads that lead back to the sea, and the final meeting of ring-bearers at the very end of the age, still waits just ahead of us. The feminine power question. Galadriel, Éowyn, and agency in Tolkien. And when we follow those grey roads forward from that surrender, we don't just see the fading of an elf queen. We see one of Tolkien's clearest meditations on what it means for a woman to wield power in a world built on domination and renunciation, on oaths and mercy. Galadriel does not stand alone in that world. Across the ages we meet Luthien, who walks into the very shadow of Angband and sings before Morgoth himself. We meet Éowyn of Rohan, who rides in secret to the Pelennor and faces the Witch King with a cry of defiance. Each of these women moves through a different mode of strength. One dances and sings the fortress of the dark enemy into sleep. One lifts a sword and breaks a prophecy. One stands beside a mirror and refuses the greatest weapon ever forged. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step together into that last image, because it's easy to miss how radical it is. Éowyn's courage is outward, martial, blazing. It explodes in a single stroke that changes the fate of Middle-earth. Galadriel's courage is inward, spiritual, almost hidden. Her battle is not against a ring-wraith on a battlefield, but against the voice that whispers, "You could rule. You could save. You could finally make the world as it should be." Which is the harder victory? Modern readers sometimes look at that moment and feel a sting. Is this, they ask, the story behind the story, that a woman with the power, the wisdom, the centuries of experience must still say no to ambition while men like Aragorn are crowned? But within Tolkien's own framework, the issue is not that she is a woman reaching too high. It is that the ring offers a kind of power no one, male or female, can wield without becoming a tyrant. Tolkien's theology of power is utterly consistent. Domination, even for good ends, is corruption in slow motion. And crucially, Galadriel is not a sidelined figure being talked down from greatness. In Lothlorien, her authority is immense and unquestioned. Celeborn is wise and noble, yet again and again we see that it is Galadriel who perceives more deeply, who speaks last, whose word shapes the grey wanderings of the Fellowship. She already bears Nenya, one of the three, preserving an ancient realm against the creeping shadow. She has what she long desired in the First Age, a realm of her own, ruled in her own right. So when she refuses the One Ring, this is not submission to some male hierarchy. No Vala commands her in that glade, no council binds her. It is a self-chosen renunciation of a darker, more intoxicating form of dominance, a rejection of becoming beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, even though she knows she could. In that sense, her agency is not diminished, but expanded. She is free enough to say no to the most tempting yes that the entire story can offer. And as we journey into what comes after that no, the slow unraveling of Lothlorien, the end of the hidden centuries of the Elven Rings, we'll see that her choice does not erase her power. It transfigures it and opens the grey roads that lead her at last toward pardon and the sea. Hidden in a minute of film. Adapting Galadriel's refusal. On screen and in the film, all of that, the rebellion, the repentance, the long grey roads toward the sea, is compressed into less than a minute of screen time. In Peter Jackson's The Fellowship of the Ring, the scene arrives quietly. We are in the golden dimness of Lothlorien, the world hushed after the visions in the mirror. Frodo offers the ring, and for a heartbeat, Galadriel is still, small, almost gentle. Then the air changes. The light dies. The screen darkens as if a shadow has passed over the sun, and her voice, once soft and measured, suddenly booms and echoes, shaking the leaves and the water. Her form expands, robes whipping in an unseen wind, until she looms as a spectral dark queen, radiant and terrible, filling the frame with a power we can feel in our bones. This is cinema doing what cinema must. Tolkien leaves the temptation largely interior, described in words and images that live in the mind. A book can linger in that hidden space where you imagine her greatness and her peril. A film has to externalize the inner storm so that in a heartbeat we all understand. This is not a polite refusal of a trinket. This is the fate of Middle-earth trembling on the edge of a knife. The transformation into a dark, almost wraith-like queen makes the invisible visible, taking the psychological and theological weight of the ring and throwing it against the screen in light and shadow. Is it less subtle than the text? Yes, but it also gets something profoundly right. We feel awe and terror together. We believe viscerally that Galadriel could take the ring and remake the world in her own image. For a second, we are almost curious. What would that age look like under her dominion? And then, just as suddenly, the storm passes. The darkness drains away, her form shrinks, her voice softens. She is again the lady of the golden wood, hands trembling, face lined with ancient weariness. And she simply says, almost to herself, "I passed the test." Yet in that compression, much is lost, or at least left as a whisper beneath the roar. The long backstory of her ambition from the First Age, her desire for a realm of her own, the hidden centuries of bearing Nenya and preserving this fragile world against decay. Those wanderings are only hinted at. The deep theology of power that Tolkien is working with, the link between this refusal and her eventual pardon and right to sail west, cannot fully unfold in a brief scene framed between action beats. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because when we journey into the lore behind that 1 minute, we uncover the story behind the story. Knowing her ancient rebellions and long repentance lets us rewatch that sudden darkening, that booming voice, those outstretched hands, and feel the weight of centuries pressing there. Let's step together into what the film can only gesture toward. The long road from proud Noldorin princess to penitent ring-bearer, and how that road makes her whispered no, the culmination of an entire age. The ring and the rings. Why Nenya survives Galadriel's temptation. And at the heart of that long road stands a quiet paradox. Galadriel is already a ring-bearer when Frodo comes to her garden. She has worn Nenya, the Ring of Water, for long grey centuries. It has not destroyed her. In many ways, it has helped her become the lady we meet beneath the golden boughs. So what makes that plain gold band on Frodo's chain so different? Why does one ring preserve her realm while the other threatens to unmake her very soul? To answer that, we journey into the hidden architecture of the rings themselves, the story behind the story of Lothlorien's beauty. The three were made last, and made in secret. Celebrimbor, wisest of the jewel-smiths of Eregion, forged them without Sauron's direct hand upon the tools. They are not weapons in the crude sense. Their purpose is preservation and healing, to hold back decay, to keep beauty unstained, to shelter memory in a world that is always falling into shadow. Yet even they are bound to the fate of Middle-earth through the One, because Sauron's law, his very method of making, underlies them. When he puts on the ruling ring, he can perceive and govern the others. But Nenya itself does not contain his will. It is not a shard of his mind whispering domination. It is more like a mirror of Galadriel's own heart, intensifying her longing to preserve, to conceal, to keep safe what she loves from the ravages of time. Dangerous, yes. Any power that can arrest the natural flow of an age carries peril. Yet its danger bends toward withdrawal and enclosure, not conquest. The One Ring is the opposite. Sauron pours his native power, his desire to order all wills to his own, into that single circle of gold. To bear it is not merely to wield a tool, it is to invite another mode of being into yourself, an ancient, burning will that seeks always to command. With the three, Galadriel remains herself, magnified. With the One, she would become an instrument through which Sauron's own pattern of thought and desire is reenacted, even if his body is gone. And for long ages, as she walks the grey roads of Lothlorien, Galadriel has lived with Nenya's double edge. She has tasted its sweetness, a land where leaves do not wither, where the song of the Eldar lingers like a forgotten summer. But she has also felt the quiet peril, the temptation to freeze the world, to refuse the passing of the Third Age, to hide forever behind a curtain of enchantment. Does that make her more confident she could handle the One? If anything, it teaches her fear in the best sense, a clear-eyed knowledge of how even good power bends the heart. When she looks into Frodo's offered ring, she is not naive. She knows exactly what it would do, because she has spent centuries watching a lesser ring pull her toward isolation. So her endurance under Nenya is not Exhibit A in a case for Galadriel could totally master the One. It is the schooling that convinces her she must refuse it. She has already seen how close preservation can slide into possessiveness, how easily a guardian can become a jailer. One more step, one more ring, and the Dark Queen she imagines would not be a fantasy at all. But if Nenya has prepared her to say no, what in that exact moment by the mirror, finally tips the balance? What turns vision into choice? The long view, Galadriel's foresight, and the fate of ages. What turns vision into choice in that grey garden above the Silver River is that Galadriel is not only looking at Frodo, she is looking through him and past him into the long, unfolding ages. Where most of us would see a trinket and a chance, she sees centuries. Tolkien hints again and again that Galadriel's mind lives on a different scale. She has walked from the bliss of Valinor, through the red glare of the kinslaying, across the grinding ice of the Helcaraxë, into the shadow of Morgoth, and then Sauron. 3 ages of the world are in her memory, and for those same ages she has possessed an unusual gift, a kind of clear, cold foresight, sharpened by her own nature and focused through tools like the mirror and Nenya. When we journey into that scene by the basin, we are not watching a sudden epiphany. We are watching the end of a very long calculation. The mirror shows things that were and things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. That is the story behind the story of her temptation. When Frodo offers the ring, Galadriel does not only imagine a single glorious victory over Sauron. She intuits the roads that would follow, the mustering of hosts under her banner, the slow hardening of her heart, the rise of new resistances among men, the fear and worship of elves who should have been her peers. Not a year of triumph, not a lifetime of order, but age upon age of rule, rebellion, suppression, and at last a downfall as terrible as Sauron's own. Can you feel how heavy that is when you can see it all at once? This long view makes the obvious solution almost meaningless. Yes, she could, with the ring, break Barad-dûr. She could scour the lands clean in white fire. But she knows with the cold logic of elven foresight that a world remade in her image would still be a wounded world, only now bound to her will. Healing by domination is not healing at all. It is a slower kind of ruin. Here comes the pattern interrupt. For Galadriel, victory is not the point. Loss is. She has already accepted in some deep place that the elves are fading, that the Third Age is not meant to end with their banners over every city. Nenya has preserved Lothlorien like a hidden memory, a fragment of the ancient West. But she knows this cannot last. To cling to Middle-earth through the One Ring would be to twist that gentle fading into a long, grey tyranny. So when she laughs, when she diminishes from the Dark Queen to the simple elf lady, we uncover the real power of foresight in Tolkien's world. It is not given so that the wise may seize control and steer the fate of Middle-earth like a captain at the helm. It is given so that, at the crucial moment, they may know what to refuse. Galadriel's vision does not drive her to grasp, but to let go, and that renunciation will open the last, fragile road toward the ring's unmaking. A test for the wise. Why the ring tempts the great more than the small. And here is where the temptation sharpens, because once Galadriel has seen what she must refuse, we journey into a harder truth. The ring does not tempt all hearts in the same way, or to the same ruin. It is not a flat, simple curse. It is a weapon that scales. The One Ring is power concentrated, but it is also power amplified. The greater the native strength and will of the bearer, the more terrible the shape that corruption can take. In Sauron's hand it was a vast engine of domination. In Isildur's, it became a seed of pride and tragedy for a whole line of kings. In Boromir, it stirs dreams of a warlord who would bend the fate of the world to his desperate hope. The ring does not create greatness. It takes what is already there and twists it, raising it to an almost mythic, destructive pitch. This is why the wise are so afraid. Gandalf will not touch it. Galadriel will not take it. They know that if they fall, they will fall far, and their fall will drag cities, forests, and entire peoples down into the grey shadow with them. Gandalf, with Narya, has already been entrusted with a fragment of ancient fire. Galadriel, with Nenya, already sustains an enchanted realm against the weariness of the age. Imagine that same will, that same long habit of command fused with the One, not a petty tyrant, a world ruler. And so we uncover the story behind the story of hobbits. Because in contrast, the Shire folk are small in body and in ambition. They love gardens, second breakfasts, genealogies, and pipeweed. Their dreams, when they have them at all, are of full larders and quiet roads, not of thrones and banners. That does not make them pure. The ring can still gnaw at them, as it does at Bilbo and then at Frodo. But it does mean that when the ring reaches for something grand to corrupt, it finds much less to grasp. This is Gandalf's strategy of smallness made flesh, and Galadriel recognizes it the moment Frodo offers her the ring. She sees not a rival, but a necessary weakness. His very ordinariness, his lack of ancient titles and vast designs, is part of what makes him the right ring-bearer. If she takes the ring, the quest becomes hers, and at once it is doomed. For how long could she, with all her buried desires, resist the urge to remake the world? So she refuses, and in that refusal, she keeps the fate of Middle-earth in smaller hands than her own. The test of the wise is not whether they can outmatch the enemy in raw power, but whether they can accept that the world, if it is to be healed at all, will be healed by those who do not seek to rule it. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next step of this deep dives into Middle-earth lore, we'll watch what that choice will cost Galadriel, and what it will finally restore. After the refusal, how Galadriel acts. Once the choice is made. So what does a queen do once she has refused a crown that could master the world? Not in theory, not in a song, but in the grey light of the very next morning. Galadriel's answer, the story behind the story of that mirror scene, begins not with retreat, but with hospitality. She does not vanish into the trees, shrouded in regret. She returns to the pavilion where the fellowship rests, and she goes on being what she has quietly been for centuries, a host, a counselor, a steady mind in a shadowed age. She speaks with each of them. She offers comfort, but never illusion. To Aragorn she does not promise that all will be well. She tells him plainly that the roads ahead will lead through war and loss. To Frodo she offers no escape from the ring, only the knowledge that he is seen and not abandoned. Refusing the One has not made her passive. It has made her precise. We journey into that precision in the gift-giving scene. Here is the practical outworking of her choice. Instead of drawing all power inward, instead of setting herself up as the single radiant center, she sends power away from herself in small, tailored measures. To Aragorn she gives the sheath for Anduril and the green stone of Elisar, affirming his kingship without seizing it. To Frodo she offers the phial of light from her own mirror, a fragment of her guarded realm entrusted to a hobbit's keeping. To Sam, simple gardener of the Shire, she gives soil of Lorien itself. Who does that if they intend to rule all? You do not salt the earth of your own dominion into another's hands. Watch how she deals with difference. With Gimli, son of Glóin, bearer of an ancient grievance, she does not demand that he become more elvish, more refined, more like her. Instead, she honors his people by asking what gift he desires, and then by granting him the lock of her hair that even Fëanor never received. With Aragorn, she does not try to fold Gondor and Arnor into some elven design. She blesses the line of men, acknowledging a fate of Middle-earth that will not include her. Is this not the opposite of the ring's will, which would make all cultures one grey, obedient mass? And, when the fellowship has gone, her refusal does not turn into abdication. Unseen in the main tale, but clear in the chronicles, she stands in the War of the Ring as a commander. Dol Guldur strikes 3 times at Lothlórien, and 3 times she and Celeborn throw back the assault, until at last they cross the river and cast down those dark walls. She has said no to ruling all, yet she still defends her own. Refusal of the ring is not refusal of responsibility, it is the cleansing of it. From this point on, every act is shaded by humility and trust. She allows others' paths to unfold, even when those paths mean the fading of her own power and the end of her hidden centuries in Middle-earth. And when the time finally comes to pass west, to lay down Nenya and leave the roads of this world, what quiet cost will that acceptance reveal? And what long-deferred homecoming will it unlock? The passing of the Third Age. Galadriel's departure and reward. The grey mists gather again, but now they lie over the sea, not the golden wood. At the very edge of the world, where the last roads of Middle-earth run out into foam and salt, an ancient white ship waits at the grey havens. Upon its deck stand the last of the ring-bearers, Frodo and Bilbo, small and quiet, Elrond and Galadriel, grave and shining, and Gandalf the Grey, who has walked with all of them through shadow. We journey into a different kind of ending here. There is no clash of steel, no blaze of war. Only gull cries, the sigh of the waves, and the soft grief of those who remain behind. Sam, Merry, and Pippin stand with Aragorn's new age at their backs, watching as the greatest of the Eldar, except Feanor, prepares to leave the land she has guarded for centuries. The Third Age is passing. The Age of Men has begun. On the surface, Galadriel's sailing west might feel inevitable. She is an elf of Valinor, ancient beyond reckoning. Of course, she returns to the Blessed Realm when her work is done. But when we uncover the story behind the story, Tolkien's late notes make something clear: that return is not automatic. Galadriel left Valinor in pride and defiance. She longed for a realm of her own, for freedom from the Valar's rule. In some versions, she is even barred from coming back. So what changes? Not her power, but her heart. Tolkien decides that her pardon is, in part, the consequence of that night in Lothlorien, when she faced the One Ring and refused it. There, at her mirror, she was offered everything she had once desired: a vast dominion, beauty unwithering, a queenly rule over all the lands under the shadow. She saw herself as a terrible and radiant queen, and she understood that this was the old rebellion in a new form. When she said, "I pass the test, I will diminish and go into the west," she wasn't speaking poetry, she was naming repentance. And now at the Grey Havens we see the cost of that repentance. Her reward is real: the healing of Valinor, the light of the trees remembered, the end of weariness after long wanderings beneath the changing years. Yet it is bittersweet. She loses forever the forests she loved, the grey rivers of Middle-earth, the people for whom she laboured through war and shadow. Have you ever noticed how quiet she is in this scene? No speeches, no proclamations, just a last shining presence, and then the turning of a ship. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable for a second, because this is the fulfillment of her own prophecy. She has diminished. Nenya's power is ended. Lothlorien will fade. She goes into the west not as a conquering queen crowned over the ruins of Sauron's realm, but as a forgiven exile, returning at last with empty hands. Not a victor claiming spoils, not a ruler demanding her due, but a penitent granted passage because she chose mercy over mastery. So Galadriel's story closes not with a coronation, but with a homecoming. The fate of Middle-earth turned on that hidden choice beneath the golden boughs. When she let the ring pass by, she opened the way not only for Frodo's quest, but for her own long-delayed pardon. And as the grey ship slips into the west and the world of men widens behind it, we're left with one more question. What does it mean that the greatest of the Eldar must leave, so that lesser hands can inherit the world? Reframing the Lord of the Rings. How Galadriel's no saves the story. And that question doesn't just linger over the havens, it reaches back into the heart of the trilogy itself. Because once we see Galadriel's refusal clearly, we uncover something easy to miss on a first read. The fate of Middle-earth hangs on that quiet no, just as surely as it does on Frodo's long walk into shadow. Imagine the other road. Frodo offers the ring, she stretches out her hand, and the one passes to a will that has endured 3 ages. The Fellowship's mission ends in that instant. There is no journey into Mordor, no desperate climb up the slag heaps of Orodruin. The story behind the story becomes a very different tale. Not a quest to unmake evil, but a chronicle of how an ancient queen, radiant and terrible, slowly freezes the world in a beauty that no longer has mercy. By refusing, she keeps the ring on its strange, improbable path through weakness. Not in the hands of the mightiest of the Eldar, not guarded in some hidden grey fortress of the wise, but back on the neck of a hobbit who can barely lift a sword. Her choice says, the ring must be destroyed, not wielded. And that decision clears the road for Frodo and Sam's small, stubborn courage to matter at all. Without her renunciation, their quiet heroism becomes irrelevant background noise to a new war of powers. This is where Tolkien's theology of power comes alive in the narrative. Victory in this age does not come by matching Sauron blow for blow, ring for ring. It comes through refusal. Gandalf turning away from the ring in Bag End, Elrond refusing to keep it in Rivendell, Galadriel rejecting it under the Golden Boughs. In that line of choices, hers is the fulcrum. She is the one who could plausibly claim, "Give it to me, and I will use it well." When she instead chooses to diminish and go into the West, she quietly validates the entire strategy of trusting the small and the lowly. And notice what flows from that refusal. Because she will not dominate, she empowers. The file of Galadriel that blazes in Shelob's lair, the grey cloaks that hide the hobbits in Ithilien, the lembas that keeps them walking when all other strength is gone. These are not the tools of a would-be dark queen. They are the gifts of someone who has decided that her role in this world is to strengthen others rather than to rule them. Had she taken the ring, there would be no file against the spider, no elven cloaks baffling the eyes of men, no quiet grace woven into the Fellowship's wanderings. In doing this, she also proves Gandalf right. His long, patient refusal to use the ring, his strategy of smallness, depends on at least one other great being making the same hard choice. When Galadriel stands firm, the moral spine of the resistance against Sauron hardens. The wise are no longer merely opposing an enemy, they are refusing to become him. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is where we journey into a deeper reframing of the whole tale. What if The Lord of the Rings is not just the story of evil being destroyed, but of the powerful learning, at last, to lay power down? In that light, Galadriel's no is not a side moment in Lorien. It is the hinge on which the age turns, and it invites us to ask who else in this long grey history had to make the same choice. From page to heart, what Galadriel's refusal asks of us. So what does that hinge have to do with us, here on the far side of the screen, with no rings of power on our fingers and no golden wood outside our window? We journey into this part gently, because it is one thing to watch Galadriel refuse the ring, and another to feel where that same temptation breathes in our own age. Most of us will never be offered the fate of Middle-earth in the palm of our hand, but we do meet smaller, quieter rings all the time. The urge to control someone for their own good, the impulse to cling to a season that is clearly passing, the temptation to take a shortcut that bends our integrity just a little in the name of a greater good. Have you felt that tug, that voice that whispers, if I just push harder, if I just take charge, I can make this turn out right? Galadriel shows us another kind of strength, not the blazing, conquering will she imagines when she cries that she would be beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, but the strength to step back from that vision and say, simply, I pass the test. Not a victory of domination, but of renunciation. Not grasping, but letting go. What if the bravest thing in your story is not the mountain you climb, but the power you refuse to use? If we hold her choice up like her mirror, it becomes less a lesson and more a reflection. Where are we tempted by a temporary tyranny in our own wanderings along the grey roads of this world? Maybe it is in a relationship where we quietly manipulate with guilt or silence. Maybe it is in a workplace where we pressure others, convinced that our plan will save the project. Maybe it is in our inner life where we try to force our own hearts rather than accept limits and time and healing. In that mirror, we can glimpse both the shadow and the light, the part of us that wants to seize, and the part that, like Galadriel at last, is willing to diminish and go into the west. Reflection here is not a lecture laid upon us, it is an invitation. We uncover in her story behind the story the possibility that good can emerge without our total control, that sometimes the fate of a world or a family or a single soul is safest when we stop trying to be its master. And so we return to the Golden Wood, to an ancient realm held aloft by Nenya's hidden power, a sanctuary that must fade because its age is ending. Galadriel could have locked the world inside that timeless spring, ruling as a radiant queen over a land that never changed. Instead, she opens her hand. She lets the ring pass on. She lets Lorien go. But what does it cost her to release such beauty, and what new road opens when she does? A final walk through Lothlorien, cinematic recap of the journey. So let's answer that question by walking the roads of Lothlorien one last time. The leaves are whispering. The light is gold and green. We move again beneath the ancient malin trees, but now the air feels heavier, as if the forest itself remembers what has just passed. We journey into that grey twilight, where time seems to fold, and we find ourselves once more at the basin of the mirror, where this whole story opened. Only now, when we look at the tall woman beside it, we see more than a mysterious elf lady with shining eyes. We see the story behind the story. Behind her stillness lies Valinor's first light, white and unsullied, when Galadriel walked beneath the two trees, and the world had not yet known the full weight of shadow. Then comes the fire of rebellion, the Noldor in arms, Feanor's burning words, oaths sworn that will poison centuries. She does not turn back. She chooses exile because in her heart there is a desire for a realm of her own, a place to rule and to guard, not a passing fancy, a defining wound. We cross the hidden centuries like stepping stones, wars of Beleriand, where kingdoms rise and fall under Morgoth's darkness. The drowning of Beleriand, when whole lands sink and the map of the world is rewritten. Her wanderings eastward, the slow founding of Lorien, this grey sanctuary by the river. The day she receives Nenya, the ring of water, and with it the power to preserve, to hold decay at bay. And for age after age of the Third Age, she waits. Not idle, not untouched by sorrow, but holding this land in a kind of suspended spring while the fate of Middle-earth moves elsewhere. All of that stands now at the mirror's edge. Frodo offers her the One Ring, a small, simple gesture, a quiet question. Will you take it? In a heartbeat, we uncover the terrible vision she reveals, herself as a queen, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, a radiant tyrant before whom all will bow. It is not an empty threat. It is a memory of desire sharpened by unimaginable power. She laughs, wild and perilous, because she sees what she could become and what she once almost chose. And then she says it. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. Those words now carry the full weight of Valinor's loss, of Noldorin pride, of drowned kingdoms and long grey waiting. Her greatest act of power is an act of refusal. Not to seize, but to let go. Not to step forward into domination, but to step back into humility. The salvation of Middle-earth hangs on that backward step. All right, Dim the lights, get comfortable for a moment, and look up. The imagined camera rises through the golden canopy, past leaves already beginning to fade in our mind's eye. Lothlorien becomes a pattern of light and shadow, a passing vision on the edge of an ending age. Let's step together into that high, drifting vantage point, where we can feel that this beauty cannot last, that the roads ahead will lead west for her, and onward for us. We leave her there, diminished yet fulfilled, and turn toward the next chapter of this deep dives into Middle-earth lore. If you could ask Galadriel one question, closing CTA and Community Circle. And yet, before we let that vision fade entirely, before the last silver leaves of Lorien fall back into the grey, I want to hand the mirror to you for a moment. Imagine that you stand where Frodo stood, cool night air on your face, the water still and black, Galadriel's gaze steady and ancient upon you. She tells you, as she told him, that the mirror shows many things, things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. But this time, she adds one quiet offer. You may ask her a single question about that choice she made when the One Ring lay within her grasp and she said, "I passed the test." What would you ask her? Would you press her about Fëanor and the long shadow of that first rebellion? Would you ask if she ever regretted refusing the power to preserve her world forever? Dim the lights, get comfortable, and really picture it. The rings gleam on Frodo's chain, the soft glow of Nenya on her hand, the weight of centuries of pride and repentance in her voice. If you could speak into that moment standing beside the mirror, what is the one hidden corner of her heart you'd want her to uncover for you? Tell us in the comments. We read them, we linger over them, and this channel honestly feels the most alive when we hear how you see these roads. Do you feel her refusal as an act of pure heroism, a final turning away from the path of Fëanor? Or does it feel more like a deep, costly repentance, the end of an age-long wanderings in search of humility? Maybe, like so much in Tolkien, it is both at once. And along her long story, which moment speaks to you most? The proud Noldorin princess leaving Valinor, the Lady of Lorien bearing Nenya in secret, or the diminished yet peaceful traveller finally allowed to sail west? If you've enjoyed walking these hidden paths with us, consider joining our little fellowship properly. Tap like so this video doesn't vanish into the algorithmic shadow, and subscribe if you want to keep journeying into the story behind the story with us. We're planning more deep dives into Middle-earth lore, following other pivotal choices. Gandalf's own refusal of the ring, Boromir's fall by the river, Faramir turning away from the weapon his father craves. And if you want to keep wandering in Middle-earth tonight, we've left some lanterns along the road. You might step next into our exploration of the Three Rings and how Nenya, Narya, and Vilya shaped the fate of Middle-earth. Or our long look at the fall of Fëanor, where the first great hunger for dominion casts its shadow over everything Galadriel later refuses. For now, we let the lights of Lorien dim. Thank you for walking these long roads of story with us, for sitting by the mirror and listening for the quiet choices that save a world. Wherever you are, whatever age you find yourself in, may you have a peaceful night under whatever stars shine above your own roof. Until we journey into the next tale, Namaria. Appendix 1. Timeline of Galadriel's life and the Rings of Power. Before we leave her beneath those golden boughs, it helps to see Galadriel's long road laid out in time. Not every date, not every battle, but the great turning points that lead from ancient rebellion to that quiet refusal beside the mirror. She is born in Valinor in the years of the trees, before the sun and moon, in a world still new and unmarred by the passing of centuries. There she grows tall and strong among the Noldor, kin to Fëanor, listening as whispers of pride and desire for distant realms creep into the councils of the wise. When Fëanor rebels and the Noldor swear their terrible oath, Galadriel does not swear it, but she does join the exile. She will not be shut inside the blessed realm. She wants a kingdom of her own. The First Age unfolds in Beleriand, under the shadow of Morgoth. Galadriel moves among the hidden strongholds of the elves, learning war, grief, and patience as the great jewels bring ruin upon her people. When the War of Wrath finally throws down Morgoth and drowns Beleriand beneath the sea, many of the Noldor are pardoned and sail west. Galadriel stays. Her road is not finished. In the Second Age, she wanders. Eriador, Lindon, Eregion, the grey coasts and deep, untamed woods. These are her halls. Around SA 1500, Celebrimbor and the Gwaith I Myrdain forge the Rings of Power. We uncover the story behind the story here. Sauron, in fair disguise, guides the making of the Lesser Rings, then, in secret forges the one in Erodruin. When he puts it on, the elves perceive his treachery and take off their rings. In this same age, the three are completed apart from him. Narya, Nenya, Vilya. One of these, Nenya, the Ring of Water, will come at last to Galadriel, and with it, the power to preserve a hidden realm against decay. After Sauron's first defeat at the end of the Second Age, Galadriel and Celeborn finally take up the guardianship of Lothlorien. Under Nenya, the Golden Wood becomes a place out of time, a memory of the elder days held against the grey tide of mortality. And for 3,000 years of the Third Age, while kingdoms rise and fall, she watches and waits, bearing her ring in secret, knowing that its beauty depends on the continued existence of the One. Now place the mirror scene on that line. It is late in the Third Age, in the winter of 3019. The Council of Elrond has already met. The Fellowship has passed through Moria and lost Gandalf in the Abyss. They rest in Lorien only a little while before turning south toward the Falls of Rauros. And in that brief pause by a silver basin, the fate of Middle-earth tilts. Afterward, the road runs swiftly. The One Ring is destroyed. With it, the three fade, Nenya's power wanes, and Lorien begins to pass into memory. Galadriel endures the last assaults on her realm. Then at last, in September of 3021, she sails west with the Ring-bearers, leaving Middle-earth to men. If you're someone who loves clear lines and anchors in this great grey ocean of story, this is your moment. Feel free to pause, to screenshot, to sketch this timeline beside your worn copy of The Lord of the Rings. Because as we journey into our final reflections, we'll step together into what this long arc of time actually means for her soul. Rebellion, power, and a single whispered, "I pass the test." Appendix 2. Key Tolkien texts on Galadriel's temptation and pardon. So, if that timeline we just traced felt like laying out a map on the table, this is where we mark the little X's. The places in the texts where Galadriel actually steps out of the grey mist of legend and speaks, and doubts, and is tempted. If you've ever closed the book and thought, where did all of this come from? This is where we journey into the story behind the story. For most of you, the first and brightest star is in The Lord of the Rings itself. Turn to the Mirror of Galadriel in the Fellowship of the Ring. In many common editions, it's late in Book 2, Chapter 7, just after the company has rested in Lothlorien. This is the scene where Frodo offers her the ring, where she grows tall and terrible, beautiful and dreadful as the morning and the night, and then suddenly laughs, diminishes, and says, "I pass the test." If you want to understand her refusal as a lived moment, not just an idea, linger there. Read her words aloud. Watch how often she speaks of fading, of the end of her own age. But the roots of that choice run back into the First Age. In the Silmarillion, you'll find Galadriel among the Noldor in Of Eldamar and the princes of the Eldalia, and of the flight of the Noldor. Here she is proud, strong of will, desiring a realm of her own in the wide world. The text is brief, almost tantalizingly so, and even within the Silmarillion there are hints of debate and revision. Was she guilty alongside Fëanor, or already resisting him? Tolkien's own mind shifted over the years, and you can feel those hidden centuries of revision pressing against the polished narrative. To see those pressure lines more clearly, you'll want unfinished tales, especially the history of Galadriel and Celeborn. This is where we uncover Tolkien's later attempts to reconcile her rebellion, her long wanderings, and her final pardon. You'll find versions where her refusal of the One Ring is explicitly tied to her forgiveness by the Valar, and others where the emphasis falls on long patience and quiet resistance. It reads almost like watching the mirror itself. Multiple visions, overlapping, none of them complete. If you're ready for deep dives into Middle-earth lore, the next road leads into the history of Middle-earth, edited by Christopher Tolkien. Volumes like The Road Goes Ever On, Morgoth's Ring and the Peoples of Middle-earth contain drafts and essays where Galadriel's role expands, contracts, and changes color from page to page. Christopher's commentary walks you through the contradictions. Sometimes she is nearly as guilty as Fëanor, sometimes already a penitent guardian of the West. Have you ever wanted to see a character being forged, not in-world, but at the writer's own desk? Treat these texts as an extended mirror of Galadriel. Each angle, Fellowship, the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, the history of Middle-earth, shows the same ancient woman under a different light. Rebel, ring-bearer, penitent, queen who refuses a crown. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, keep those books close by. Because next, we'll step together into what all these visions add up to. Why, when the fate of Middle-earth hangs on a golden band in a hobbit's hand, she looks into herself, remembers ages of pride, and still says no. Appendix 3. Comparing Galadriel's refusal to other fantasy power tests. So now we've watched Galadriel stand before the ring and refuse it, not in ignorance but with her whole ancient memory awake. Before we move on, let's step together into a slightly wider world for a moment and look at how rare that answer really is. In many beloved fantasy tales, a hero is offered a weapon or a crown of astonishing might, something that promises to end the great evil of their age. Often the drama lies in whether they are worthy to take it up, to master it, to wield fire without being burned. The pattern is familiar. Accept the power, prove your purity, win the day. The gift validates the hero. Tolkien walks a different road. For him, there are powers in this world that cannot be mastered, only submitted to or rejected. The ring is not a neutral tool that can be safely held by a sufficiently noble heart. It is an instrument of domination, forged in malice, tuned to the will of a single dark mind. To claim it, even for good, is already to step into its shadow. That is why, in this story behind the story, the true test is not whether Galadriel is strong enough to use the ring, but whether she is humble enough to let it pass by. Think of how unusual that is. We journey into other tales where the climax is the righteous unleashing of a hidden power, the long-awaited moment when the Quiet One finally lets it all out and the enemy is swept away. Contrast that with Galadriel's vision, herself as a queen, beautiful and terrible, adored and feared, remaking the fate of Middle-earth by sheer will. Tolkien lets her imagine the very fantasy many stories would reward, and then he has her refuse it, not because she lacks courage, but because she has learned what such self-exaltation costs. Since The Lord of the Rings, that scene in the grey woods of Lothlorien has cast a long, quiet influence. Later authors echo it in their own ways. The mentor who will not take the weapon, the chosen one who lays down the crown, the mage who breaks the staff rather than rule. Even when their worlds have no valor, no explicit theology, you can feel the ripple of that moment when an elf lady steps back into the shadows and says, "I will diminish." Galadriel's refusal becomes a template for power renounced rather than perfected. But we should be careful not to flatten all these moments into a single trope, as if turning down power always meant the same thing. Tolkien's imagination is distinctly Catholic. Creation is good, subcreation is a holy imitation, and the great sin is to seize what belongs only to the Creator, to make others into extensions of your own will. The ring is damnable precisely because it offers a false godlike role. Galadriel's wisdom is not generic self-denial. It is the hard-won acceptance that her calling is to tend, to preserve, to let go, not to remake the world in her image. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here's your pattern interrupt. What happens when you carry that lens back into other stories you love? When a character takes up the ancient blade or accepts the cosmic upgrade, do we now hear, faintly, the echo of an elf in white saying no? For those of you who enjoy deep dives into Middle-earth lore and beyond, Galadriel's choice can become a quiet measuring rod, a way to ask each time power is offered. Is this a tool to serve or a throne to dominate? And what does it cost the soul that says yes? Next, we'll return from these wider wanderings to the Grey Woods themselves, and we'll uncover what Galadriel's refusal actually changes, for herself, for Frodo, and for the long, hidden centuries still to come. Appendix 4. Language, Imagery, and the Poetics of the Dark Queen Vision. So when we return to the Grey Woods, to that green hollow where Frodo lifts the chain, we're not just watching a choice. We're watching a poem erupt into the air of Middle-earth, a sudden vision of what the world would look like if Galadriel said yes. Listen to the line that anchors it. And there were elves that saw her, and they thought that she was beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. Not only beautiful, not only terrible, both, fused into one impossible figure. Morning is the first light, the promise of a new age. Night is the ancient dark, the realm of fear and unknowing. To be as the morning and the night is to hold both revelation and concealment, blessing and dread, in a single presence. Who could stand before that and not tremble just a little? Tolkien builds that trembling through rhythm. Hear how the images pile up. Fair as the sea and the sun and the snow upon the mountain. Short, then longer still. Each "and" is a wave, rolling higher. Sea, sun, snow. Breadth, brilliance, purity. It's as if the language itself swells, trying to contain a grandeur that keeps spilling over its edges. We journey into that cadence almost without noticing, carried along the roads of the sentence until we're suddenly standing at a height that feels unsafe. And notice the capitals. Morning, night, sea, sun, mountain. These are not just times of day or bits of scenery. They're almost characters, ancient powers. By lifting them into capitalized abstractions, Tolkien signals that what the ring offers Galadriel is not merely political rule over this forest or that kingdom, but dominion written into the elements of the world itself. This is power on the scale of sunrise and storm. If that sounds familiar, it's because we've heard an echo of it in the older legendarium. The Valar and the Maiar are often described in sweeping, cosmic terms. Manwë as Lord of the Winds, Vardar crowned with the stars, Melkor cloaked in fire and shadow. Galadriel's Dark Queen vision inverts that angelic register. She would be like a Maiar, but darkened, a being whose light has turned against the fate of Middle-earth. Not a lesser Sauron, but a rival power, radiant where he is foul, yet no less enslaving. And this is the quiet brilliance. The passage itself is beautiful. The images are clear, musical, intoxicating. We feel the pull. For a heartbeat, we almost want to see that queen unveiled in full. That shiver of attraction is part of the temptation. The story behind the story is that we, like Frodo, must learn to step back from what dazzles simply because it dazzles. In a moment, we'll uncover what her refusal does to that vision, how the morning and the night resolve back into a grey, weary lady who chooses to diminish, and thus changes the hidden centuries that follow. Appendix 5. Debated canons. How much of Galadriel's guilt is real? So when that vision of the Dark Queen fades, we hit a question that divides readers as much as it divided Tolkien himself. How guilty is Galadriel, really? Because the answer you give to that will gently shift how you feel the weight of her refusal. Is this a sudden breaking point or the final note in a long, grey song of repentance? Among scholars and fans, you can trace a whole spectrum. On one end, Galadriel is almost a near-innocent bystander in the Noldorin rebellion, swept along by the tide of her people, resisting Fëanor's worst oaths, and leaving Valinor chiefly from a desire to see the wide world. On the other, she is an active co-conspirator, proud, ambitious, eager for a realm of her own, matching Fëanor in will if not in madness. Which Galadriel are we standing before in Lothlorien? The answer depends on which roads through the legendarium you walk. In the published Silmarillion, shaped by Christopher Tolkien from ancient and often conflicting drafts, Galadriel's role is present, but muted, the edges softened. She is great, she is proud, she takes part in the exile, but her darkest choices remain in the shadow. Then, in Tolkien's late wanderings on paper, we uncover a different emphasis. He experiments with versions where she defies Fëanor more openly, or where her leaving is less stained by rebellion, and more by a restless desire to oppose Morgoth and to rule wisely in Middle-earth. You can feel the old professor wrestling page by page with the story behind the story. Why this struggle? Because by the time he is revising, Galadriel of the Lord of the Rings already exists, the wise lady of the Golden Wood, bearer of Nenya, long opposed to Sauron, one of the chief guardians of the fate of Middle-earth. Tolkien is trying to reconcile that almost saintly figure with earlier notes that made her more flawed, more like Fëanor's rival than his opposite. Not a simple task, not a simple woman, but a necessary tension if her no to the ring is to ring true. So, depending on which canon you privilege, the more fixed published Silmarillion or the later more tentative notes, you may lean one of two ways. Either her refusal is the crowning act of repentance at the end of a very long arc of pride, or it is the natural flowering of a heart that has been repenting, quietly, for centuries, stewarding Lorien as a kind of penance. In one reading, she steps back from a throne she almost seized once before. In the other, she simply continues the path she has already chosen, now brought into the brightest, most terrible light. But we don't need to be paralyzed by these competing texts. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. This is one of those deep dives into Middle-earth lore where the contradictions are the point. The very multiplicity of versions tells us that Tolkien himself was asking, what kind of person could look upon absolute power and refuse it? What mixture of ancient guilt, long endurance, and hard-won wisdom would it take? However we calibrate her guilt, one thing remains. A great one within reach of a hidden throne chooses to step down. She lets the age move on without her. And as we journey into what that choice unleashes, on her, on Lorien, and on the grey future of the West, you may find that the real cost of her no is only just beginning to be revealed. Appendix 6. Visualizing the alternate future, art, fanworks, and the Dark Queen. And here, in the wake of that refusal, the imagination of the age does something fascinating. It does not look away from the future she denied. It paints it, it writes it, it lingers over it in 100 quiet corners of the fandom, as if the world itself is trying to make visible the weight of what she set aside. If you've ever wandered through fan art galleries or fallen into late-night fan fiction roads, you've seen her. Dark Queen Galadriel, radiant and terrible, seated on a living throne of intertwined Malorn trees, their roots drinking shadow, their leaves burning with pale gold. Above her stretches a sky that is neither day nor night, but a vault of starlight veiled in grey cloud, as though Varda's ancient work had been claimed and reordered to one will. Below, in disciplined ranks, march armies beneath a banner of silver and gold, the colours of the two trees now marshalled for war. These images are not accidents. They are the flowering of that one moment at the mirror when she herself declares what she might become, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, stronger than the foundations of the earth. Artists simply follow the story behind the story, taking Tolkien's own words and letting them ripen into full, unsettling vision. What would her gaze look like if no longer held back? How would Lorien itself twist and bloom under the ring's dominion? Here's the pattern interrupt. These what-if visions, for all their crowns and blackened stars, often bring us closer to Tolkien's heart rather than farther away. Because when you stand before a painting of Galadriel wreathed in unearthly light, when you read a tale where Sauron falls only to be replaced by a queen of implacable justice, you feel something you might miss on a quiet page in the Fellowship of the Ring. You feel the pull. You feel the terrible beauty of the future she could have claimed. And suddenly, her laughter and her "I pass the test" are not abstract virtues, but a door slammed shut on a very vivid, very tempting world. So how do we hold this? On one hand, we journey into deep dives into Middle-earth lore through these fanworks, exploring the hidden centuries that never were. On the other, we have to be careful. If we dwell only in the splendor of the Dark Queen, we risk forgetting that, for Tolkien, her true greatness lies precisely in not becoming that figure. In refusing to rule by fear, in letting her ancient desire for a realm of her own finally die. The invitation, then, is not to turn away from these alternate futures, but to let them curve back toward the central question. What kind of person, shaped by rebellion, exile, and long grey wanderings, can look upon a future that beautiful and that terrible, see the fate of Middle-earth bending toward her throne, and still say no? As we move forward, let's step together into the world that actually followed from that no, and trace what her renunciation sets loose upon the Third Age. Last light in the Golden Wood, final blessing and farewell. So now we come back, one last time, to the edge of the Golden Wood. The Fellowship's boats slip out onto the grey current of Anduin, torches dwindling, oar strokes whispering like breath. Upon the green sward of Terin Amroth's memory, beneath the ancient Melian, Galadriel stands in silence and watches them go. Her hands are empty. The ring is with the Hobbit. The great choice has already been made in that quiet glade where she laughed, and the laughter was like the breaking of a spell. Yet because of that no, her heart is lighter than it has been in many centuries, as if some hidden chain, long carried and almost forgotten, has finally slipped from her shoulders and fallen soundless into the grass. We journey into a moment that looks small from far away. A few grey boats, a queen beneath the trees, a ring-bearer glancing back only once. But the fate of Middle-earth moves on that current. Behind Frodo's bent head, behind the white gleam of her hand raised in farewell, lies the story behind the story. A rebel of the First Age who has finally laid down her demand to rule, and chosen instead to let the world be free of her will. And in ages yet to come, Lothlorien will fade. The golden roof will pale, the song of the Galadhrim will thin, and the hidden power of Nenya will pass away into the west. That will not be a failure, it will be a benediction. Beauty that was given, guarded and then released, rather than clutched until it curdled into shadow. Is that not, in its own quiet way, a greater miracle than any victory of arms? For this is what her refusal teaches us, if we let it. Some doors must remain closed, even when we have the key. Some powers must be refused, even when we feel certain we could use them well. And some treasures must be allowed to pass out of our hands, so that they do not pass out of our hearts. So here, at the end of this deep dive into Middle-earth lore, accept a blessing in Galadriel's spirit. May you find the courage to say no to the wrong offers, even when they come robed in your brightest dreams. May you know when to step back from a throne that was never truly yours. May you have the wisdom to let certain ages of your own life pass, not in bitterness, but in gratitude. Dim the lights, get comfortable with that thought for a moment, because as this tale draws to its close, the road does not. We uncover one path and 10 more appear at the edge of our campfire's glow. The hidden centuries of this world are full of wanderings we have not yet walked together. So picture this as we bank the fire and rise, cloak rustling in the night. Far to the south, the ring moves on in a small brown hand. Above the dark river, the leaves of the Malorn stir in a quiet wind. And behind them, in the golden wood, stands a queen who chose to remain herself.